According to government estimates, Nigeria's debt service expenses will total 10.4 trillion naira by the end of the year 2025. The most recent medium-term expenditure framework and strategy paper for the nation made this known. Is this healthy or is it alarming? Is Nigeria still safe economic-wise? Well, on the flip side, still in Nigeria, sales of assets belonging to Mobile Unlimited to indigenous firm that is supplied is still in limbo, with two arms of government giving contradictory information. So we get to look at that, and also later on the show in Women in Business, a Zimbabwean lady has braved the odds by moving goods and cargo between South and East Africa. And those are the stuff that we have for you on Business Edge this morning. I am Lekon Onobanjo. Right about now, let's start with the African business headlines. The National Bureau of Statistics has revealed that Nigeria's mineral production grew by 39.19% in 2021 from 64.29 million tons recorded in 2020 to 89.48 million tons in 2021. And this was disclosed by the NBS in a report titled Mineral Production Statistics for the year 2021. The report added that the most mined mineral in Nigeria remains granite at 22.3 million tons. Kenyans are set to enjoy cheaper calls after mobile network operators agreed to cut their mobile rates to 0.58 shilling starting August 1. The interim mobile termination rate and fixed termination rate will apply for a period of 12 months, after which the Communication Authority shall issue new rates based on the outcome of the ongoing network cost study. The authority had on December 23, 2021 issued a determination on interconnection rates, reducing the prevailing MTR and FTR from 0.99 shilling to 0.12 shilling. According to the July 2022 Sub-Saharan Africa's Auto Sales Report by Fitch Solutions, a developing automotive sales environment amid a favorable political risk outlook has enabled policy certainty in the country. The country managed to outperform its regional peers under Fitch Solutions' short and long-term political risk scores in its risk-reward index, scoring a respective 51.2% and 70.2% under these indicators. However, the report said Ghana's underdeveloped road infrastructure remains a deterrent for potential, as the country scores 16.9% under its quality and extent of transport network indicator, underperforming the SSA region's average score of 21.6% under the same indicator. Now, Egypt has awarded BP and ENI a gas exploration concession in the Eastern Mediterranean, according to BP's North African manager, Karim Allah. Each company will have a 5% stake in the 3,200 square kilometers, that's about 1,236 square miles concession located off Port Said. And those are the headlines from the African continent. When we go on a break now, we return to discuss a pertinent issue that has to do with Nigeria. Now, Nigeria's debt servicing cost is set to hit 10 trillion naira by the year 2025. That will be our next discussion. Do stay with us. We'll be right back. Nigeria's government is projecting that debt servicing will cost 10.4 trillion naira by the year 2025, and this was revealed in the country's most recent medium-term expenditure framework and strategy paper. This means that by 2025, Nigeria's debt service payments will be more than double what they were in 2021, when the country paid 4.2 trillion naira. This is an increase of 147%. The country's borrowing has been under scrutiny for a few years, and at the beginning of President Muhammadu Buhari's time in office, debt didn't seem so bad. The plan was to use the money to upgrade infrastructure, thus fueling economic growth. But after the first Eurobond came another and another and another came, and then they just kept coming. Between 2015 and 2020, Africa's most populous country borrowed $21 billion from abroad, pushing its foreign debt to $28 billion. Is that scary or not? Nigeria's government maintains that its borrowing is not a problem. And members of the country's cabinet cite Nigeria's debt to GDP ratio, which looks good at 22%, as a reason for their assertion. They insist that the country needs to improve revenue generation. This typically means more taxes. Critics, many of whom are in the private sector, tend to agree that Nigeria could stand to generate more revenue, but insist that Nigeria is simply borrowing too much. And so from North Carolina, USA, we have Mukhtar Mohammed, CEO, Asher Dynamic Solutions, and it's always good to have him join us on Business Edge. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you.
So I can see you smiling, but then, of course, Nigeria is not smiling right now because it's a dire situation, and we want to have you discuss that. So let's just get right into it. Does it actually look as though Nigeria is in this billion-dollar debt issue because it is not spending enough, or because it is not taxing its people enough, or because it is spending recklessly? It's quite simple. It is tricky, but then what do you say?
Well, of all your three scenarios, I tend to a little bit differ. I mean, Nigerians, are we spending enough? Are we taking more risks, or are we definitely taxing the people too much? I think what we're seeing is that we're trying to tax the people too much compared to trying to widen our revenue base. I think that's what we need to do than taxing the people. And at the moment, I don't think the government is doing that. We need to see how we can widen the tax bracket. The United States of America debt to GDP is very poor. I mean, it's high. I mean, very poor comparable to Nigeria, but their debt to revenue is better. So what we look is, you don't use the GDP to pay the debt, you use your revenue. I think what Nigerians should be looking is, how can we widen the revenue gap? How can we begin to get more people to pay tax? Not just the companies, but we begin to look at how we can get the informal sector to pay tax, how we can get more using tax as a means to grow our economy, employ more people, and the superintendent pay tax. That's how developed economies all over the world work. And if we are striving from a developing economy to a developing economy, we need to start doing things right. And the challenge is not about the debt itself, which is if you widen your revenue base, then you'll be able to pay those debts. And especially if those debts are going to infrastructure, that are going to help some of this informal business grow, I don't think it will be a problem. Unfortunately, I don't think the government is thinking in that direction at the moment. But what the government is thinking of is to tax existing businesses. Let me give you an example. If the government is looking at using in this medium-term revenue report that they just gave, projection they gave, they are intending to pay subsidy of about 6.something trillion. If just 1 trillion is put into modeling refinery, that will make sure that we're able to get local consumption. So we need to begin to look at our spending structure via our debt. How much revenue are we getting? How much are we spending? And what are we spending it on? You can be spending your resources on a recurrent expenditure rather than putting your resources on current expenditure. So these are the challenges that Nigeria needs to deal with. And in dealing with these challenges, there must be the political will, and there must be the part of government to do the right thing and listen to the right advice and begin to see how we can widen. You see, we've talked so much about getting the non-oil sector to begin to do more like the oil sector. But what we need now as a country is to widen our revenue base.
Well, you've given them a lot of solutions, but then we will do more on that. But I would like you to do something. Let's look at Nigeria's Fourth Republic during the new dispensation, democratic dispensation of the then president, Olusegun Obasanjo. As at that time, he inherited $28 billion in external debt. And he was able to launch a campaign, that is a debt forgiveness campaign and reduction campaign. And to some extent, was able to succeed in that. By the time he was leaving office, the external debt reduced to about $2.8 billion. But then fast forward to the year 2023, you discover that Nigeria has been plunged into about $36 billion of debt. So I'm wondering, is it that the economic dynamics of way back then is different as of now? Or would you say it's just, of course, not being prudent with the finances that, of course, the loans that came in?
In two ways. If you look at the economy reality at that time, and I remember Nigeria was a pariah nation at that time. We're coming out of a long military regime. A lot of countries all over the world wanted to deal business with Nigeria. We saw Nigeria as that golden, more or less like a country that just gained independence because of a lot of democracy that came to being at that time, knowing that we've gone through almost 20-something years of military regime. And that is one. Then secondly, you mustn't forget that we had the finance minister then that was well respected globally. That was Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. He had to move for this through the using his position then in the IMF and all that to make Nigeria to have debt forgiveness. And then again, you need to look at that debt at that time. Most of those debts were actually like interest that we're paying. So we fully paid off the initial debt, but those are different. Then in terms of management of resources, I think that's where Olusegun Obasanjo administration was better, because they never got when it came to power, I think oil price was about between $15 to $20 per barrel. At the time he was leaving, the oil price had moved as high as $40 per barrel, and he was able to leave us with a healthy reserve. Not only that, we have the SS crude account. We saw that resources were prudently managed. But look at this current administration. When he came into power, he has the same challenge of about $20 to $25. I mean, about $30 per barrel. It moved to 40, it moved to 60, it moved to 17, and they moved to about 100 or a height of about 110. But now it's slipped down to $95 per barrel. Yet we've not seen those man. I think when you look at prudence, then you say that that administration was more prudent. But when you look at the goodwill that the administration enjoyed, they enjoy a lot of goodwill than the present administration. So you look at it that way, then you're able to make a balance out of it.
But then, Mukhtar, I would always want to understand, why is it so hard? Because most times when these countries, like African countries, go to the international bodies looking for loans, they tell them that they always want to plug these finances in probably infrastructural development, investments, and all whatnot. So why is it that they do not follow through with their commitments or their agreements or what they said they were going to do? Why is it that they've not been able to conduct due diligence with the finances, with the loans that they get, and put it in the right places for proper investments? What is actually the problem with that?
If you look at this administration, let's look at the question by this administration. They seem to have borrowed well. If you look at all the borrowing were tied to specific projects, the Mambela Power Project, the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, the train, the Lagos-Ibadan train, the Kaduna-Abuja train railway. I mean, a lot of borrowing that they're doing were tied to specifics in projects, so you need to give that to them. But the challenge Nigerians were saying is that it came to a point where at this moment you need to begin to look at other creative ways of borrowing. And one of those creative ways of borrowing that we've suggested for the government and they didn't take was to use your own project as a collateral and say, okay, fine. What we call the PPP, public-private partnership. We see that play out in the Murtala Mohammed International Airport too, whereby you tell the private sector, this is what I'm bringing to the table. I give you the roads network belongs to me, the airport belongs to me, but I'm going to give you to build your own terminal and maintain for the next 25 years. And in that 25 years, you may not be your profit will still be taxed, but you still see that government is not putting its revenue there, but yet it's gaining because the companies that are operating that place will have to pay tax and also have to develop the income. So those are the things that we're suggesting to government, that begin to use your projects as a collateral to get, instead of you going to borrow. Why can't you use some of these projects and put them down and say, this is what I'm bringing to the table. You build and operate for the next 10 to 20 years. And after that, we will in turn take over. And so you are able to gain, you are able to recover your own revenue. And in areas where like government is saying, okay, we want to directly fund it, which have to be like a way of social investment, then government should also be thinking of, look, how do we do that? We do that by making, let's give an example. If you're constructing a road by borrowed money, you have to tow that road, you have to tow it, and so that you begin to earn revenue and begin to pay your debt. So those are the creative nature that government should begin to look at. All over the world, if you want to practice capitalism, capitalism is not cheap. Capitalism means that you bring something to the table, the people bring something to the table. I am of the opinion that government should begin to look at creative way to capture the informal sector. If they are able to capture the informal sector, they are widening the tax bracket by over 200%. And even if you say we are going to be paying, your debt profile will go to about 100, you said about 47% in 2025. You've already widened your tax bracket by almost 200%, so you're able to pay without any struggle. That's what happens in the developed economy, especially in America. So we need to begin to look at innovative way of growing our economy via taxes.
All right, let's just broaden the scope briefly a bit. Between June 2014, January 2015, oil prices halved, and this plunged Nigeria and probably some other few African countries into recession. And of course, oil-producing countries on the continent had to cut spending, that is public spending, as a result of the declining revenue. So you just tell us, during that period, how did the African countries fare at that time? And did they also exhibit these borrowing patterns that Nigeria is associated or described with? And would you also go by the way of cutting public spending, because you talked about using projects as collateral for loans? So would you also advocate that Nigeria cuts its public spending so as to be able to mitigate or to be able to manage its resources?
Well, I think in African countries, you say that a lot of African countries also went borrowing. You just need to look at our neighbor Ghana. They are also still borrowing today. They're still talking to IMF. They're still talking to World Bank. South Africa also a lot of developing economy, and also a lot of African countries are in tears situation at the moment because they needed to borrow because revenue was not coming in. There was, remember, you don't forget about COVID-19 also was there. And when they think that was over, the Russia-Ukraine crisis came in. So a lot of African countries are really in a bad state because they borrowed so much. And recently we heard about an African country where they borrowed so much from China, and China was trying to take over the country itself. So you see, there's nothing bad in borrowing, but you need to make sure that you have the revenue to pay. And then if you come to Nigeria, when you look at the overbloated civil service, then I think we need to cut our expenditure. But again, when you look at it critically and look at it closely, you realize that the civil service is not really just the problem, because the civil service is not that bloated like we are meant to understand. But the political appointees, let's start from the presidency. You see the president having two ministers of senior special advisor or media to the president. We have two. Why do we need two special advisors to the? And those special advisors will also have secretaries. They will also have clerk. The president also have secretary. They also have clerk. So it's about cutting down the current expenditure, which I think and this administration promised when they came to power that they were going to bring it down. Unfortunately, they've not been able to address it. Even with the creation of a single treasury account, they've not been able to reduce wastage and corruption in the system. I think that's what they need. And most of this corruption are perpetrated by those in the political class that are not a public servant, but they came into political appointment and so on. So we need to look at that. Why do we need to have an overbloated political appointees? I'm not even talking about the Senate now. I'm sure that by the time we reduce, the senators also will have to take or they have their own personal assistant there. So there's a lot of things that are going in terms of public spending. You see the ministers, you see the government officials going about with 3 to 4, 5 cars, sometimes 6 cars in their entrance. All this have to reduce to bring down public spending. So by that, you are able to save money and channel it into social investment, like in agriculture, no social investment like in school, health, education. Presently now, the public investing Nigerians are in Nigeria home because of lack of revenue, according to government, to meet up with the demand of academic staff, university. So these are measures. And again, like I said, corruption has not helped the country achieve that. We need to cut down on public spending. And by doing that, we need to reduce political appointees. The political class need to begin to think of the people in the long term than their own political future.
All right, finally, before I let you go, Mukhtar, the IMF warned that 20 African countries are at a very high risk of falling into debt distress. You talked about Ghana the other time. Of course, Kenya is in the mix. Two foremost African economies, they're within the mix. Even Nigeria seem to be walking that path. So if you are going to be critical in terms of decision making and you're going to proffer solutions, I would like you to deal with that and say these are the 1, 2, 3 critical things that they need to do if they hope not to get into debt distress.
One, we need to learn to do businesses within ourselves. We've talked about the African partnership. We need to begin to see Africans can do business within ourselves. That's where we talk about the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. That agreement, we've not taken advantage of it. Secondly, we need, as African country, we need to begin to think of how we can produce what we need, especially in the agricultural sector, and be able to feed ourselves. Then thirdly, like we say, the political class need to have the political will to begin to cut down on expenditure, especially recurrent expenditure. Let's channel this money into productive ventures. And also we need to begin to also, in terms of channeling this money into productive venture, we need also to begin to think inwardly. How can we reduce capital plight, not just in terms of revenue, also in terms of intellectuals? Those are things that can be achieved, and those things are not rocket science. We just need to have the political will to do them, and the most especially doing businesses within ourselves, reducing the cost of business. Why is it cheaper for me to get a product in the United States, even if that product is produced in Ghana? Why is it cheaper to get it here than to get it in Ghana? So we need to begin to look at that. By the time we look at all those things, we are able to help ourselves, and then we are able to look inwardly. We are able to help our currency grow. So that is one. Then secondly, like I said, also recurrent expenditure. We need to look at that public spending. The political class need to look inwardly, think of the countries in the long run than their own political future, because some of them need employ all this people because they are thinking of re-election. The second time, then, like I said, we need to look at also our educational sector, build it up strongly so that we don't have this brain drain that we have to other nations. If we're able to accomplish that 3 steps, I think we'll be fine in the long run.
Well, the question is, if we are able to complete that 3 steps, like you've mentioned, that is, if they're able, it's conditional, if they're able to do that. So maybe there could be some reprieve. But then we must thank you so much, Mukhtar Mohammed, for joining us on Business Edge.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. So while the federal government has consistently come under the hammer of multilateral agencies and economies who also have warned about the rising cost of debt service, the country's finance minister, that is Zainab Ahmed, thinks otherwise. According to the finance minister and, of course, the director general of the Debt Management Office, that is Patience Oniha, both have insisted that the country currently has a revenue problem and not a debt problem, as posited. So how is Nigeria going to generate more revenues and prevent going into debt distress? Is it by taxing or overtaxing the citizens while it exports almost nothing and imports virtually everything? It's not as though the solutions are not there. Even Mukhtar Mohammed has expanded and spoken about a few things that can be done. But the question is, will they take that initiative? Well, that is a big question and a big conversation for another day. Right now, let's just take you through international business news. And we start off, we're not going for a break. We'll just take you through international business news. And we start by telling you that inflation data due to be released on Wednesday, which is today, is expected to show at least a partial cooling down of consumer prices and brings a breath of fresh air for the U.S. president, that is Joe Biden, just months before crucial midterm elections. Fueled by aggressive consumer spending of pandemic savings, global supply chain snarls, domestic worker shortages, and Russia's war on Ukraine, inflation reached 9.1% in June, year-over-year, the highest in 40 years. But it is expected to fall to 8.6% in July, according to MarketWatch. In Britain, energy sector bosses will take part in crisis talks with Chancellor Nadim Zahawi and Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng, as the price cap was forecast to hit more than £4,200 in January. In a new dire outlook for households, Cornwall Insight said bills are set to soar to around £3,582 in October from £1,971 on Tuesday, before rising even further in the new year. There has been widespread anger at Shell, BP, and British gas owner Centrica, announcing bumper financial results while households struggle to cope with soaring bills. Now, China's consumer inflation rose in July to a two-year high. Official data showed on Wednesday, with a surge in pork prices pushing up the cost of food. Food prices were up 6.3% on year, with pork spiking 20.2% in July, while fuel prices were also higher than the same period last year. China's Consumer Price Index, a key gauge of retail inflation, grew less than expected at 2.7% from a year ago in July, according to the National Bureau of Statistics, as it showed in its data. Meanwhile, Asian equities fell on Wednesday, tracking a drop on Wall Street ahead of a crucial U.S. inflation report later in the day, which could have a huge bearing on the Federal Reserve's plans for raising interest rates. Investors are preparing for the consumer price figures with a sense of dread, as analysts warn a forecast-beaten reading would ramp up bets on another big Federal Reserve hike and reinforce recession expectations. Now, the U.S. Central Bank has said its decision on when and by how much to tighten monetary policy, which will be driven by data, as it struggles to walk a fine line between bringing inflation down from 4-decade highs and trying not to damage the economy. And finally, an industrial yard in southwestern Norway decommissioned oil platforms which are slowly being dismantled for a second life in the circular economy. 3 gigantic disused platforms stand on the docks on the island municipality of Stord, where they are being taken apart bit by bit. As much as 98% of their total 40,000 tons is suitable for recycling. And the platform from the Gida field that was closed in 2020 and 2 others that have paid their dues at the Valhall field are, however, still in operation. And that's it on international business headlines. And now, sales of Mobil Unlimited assets to the indigenous company Seplat is still pending, and 2 government agencies are providing conflicting information. That will be our next conversation. Do stay with us. We'll be right back.